Testing, testing. Good evening, Planning Committee.
Good evening.
Welcome to this evening's meeting on Thursday the 9th of June, and it's very nice, so we don't want to be here too long tonight, do we? No.
Well, it's all according.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll have a vote, yeah. Just to remind everybody and the public that everyone present here at this meeting, we will be broadcasting live via the internet, and the record of the archived viewings will be archived for future viewing and any training purposes. So just to remind members. Okay then, shall we move to apologies for absence? I know that Councillor Anthony Powell gave his apologies. Any others? No, I think we've more or less...
Yes, Chair, sorry. We've had apologies from Councillor Eric Hacker. Thank you.
Oh, Councillor Hacker as well. Okay, thank you for that. Everybody's read the minutes of the last meeting. Anybody want to say anything about the minutes of the last meeting, or we move with?
Second.
There we are. Moved by Jonathan Bird and seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. Everybody happy?
Yeah.
Thank you. To receive declarations of interest under the Council's Code of Conduct, any member want to mention anything in dispatches? I always look across at Andrew Parker, but he's waving his head, so... We are rather thin on the ground. Thank you for that. Site inspections, the reports of the Managing Director. Is there anything to add, Victoria?
Nothing to add, Chair.
Thank you. Move we note? Yeah. Everybody happy? Yeah. Thank you. building regulation applications other than building control matters determined by the director under his delegated powers, which is agenda item 5 for those who are watching. Anything to add to those, Victoria? Move we note.
Yeah.
Everybody happy?
Yeah.
Thank you. Planning applications determined by the director under his delegated powers, which is agenda item 6. Anything to add, Victoria?
Nothing to add.
There we are. Nothing to add. Thank you. All happy?
Yeah.
Thank you. Agenda item 7 is appeals. I know we've got someone from enforcement. Anything to add to this, please?
Nothing, Chair, only just to highlight that we've had an appeal for the hangars site in Landau, which is quite a contentious, was quite a contentious application. We're still waiting to serve an enforcement notice in respect of the unauthorised use of the site, so it's likely that, well, I'm hoping that those two appeals will be linked if they appeal the notice. But other than that, nothing else to note.
Okay. Members happy with that? Yeah. Move we note? Yeah, thank you very much. Agenda item 8 is trees and the little I, the delegated list on page 22. Anything to add, Victoria? There we are. Nothing to add. Move we note? Yeah, everybody happy?
Yeah.
Good, thank you. Okay, then this is a little bit more difficult. We on agenda item 9. This is enforcement action. This is on page 23, the land and building to the rear of Tudor Lodge in Bombleston. This has been subject to a lot of visits by us as a committee, and I know that it's a contentious issue for the planning officers because he's not conforming to what he's supposed to do. But I'll let our enforcement officer, Justina Moss, deliver the report.
Thank you, Chair. This is a report that deals with two principal issues, but one of them, there are several parts attached to it. The report does recognise that there are other breaches or potential breaches of planning control at the site, and that once further investigation has taken place into those, and with one of them there is a current application being considered by us, but once those matters are progressed further, it may be necessary for us to come back to committee to seek further authorisations. But this report relates simply to the planning permission that was granted for the access track and some engineering works to the rear, and in respect of a storage building that was granted permission, which is close to the rear of the property at Tudor Lodge. With regard to the planning permission for the access track and engineering works, there were a number of conditions of that permission which should have been complied with, and those haven't been complied with. The first referred to in the report is in respect of a landscaping scheme, the idea of which is to take away the more domestic features of the works that were undertaken, allowing them to retain the engineering works but take away the more domestic items. The paragraph 5 and 6 deal with conditions relating to the parking of vehicles on the land to the rear of the property, and as you may know, there's the planning permission granted the access track, but that no vehicles are parked on the land to the rear, which is not the garden, that the vehicles have to be parked within the garden, and it requires compliance with the scheme that was approved under the planning permission. And then the last matter under that first issue is in respect of the entrance gates. Details should have been submitted for entrance gates and entrance wall to the site. And those details should have been more agricultural in their appearance. Everything that has been proposed by the owner has always been very domestic looking. And in fact, he has constructed a means of enclosure there that is in excess of what is permitted and is too domestic in its appearance. So with regard to that condition, we're not requiring him to submit details. What we're looking to do is advise him what he should do. So it would be to reduce the height of the wall and to construct an agricultural style timber or steel 5-bar gate, so that reflects the setting of just that entrance. The other main issue is in respect of a storage building. that was, first of all, granted permission as a stable, but that wasn't built. They didn't start building that in accordance with the permission that was granted for the stable building. What eventually was permitted was an agricultural storage building. That hasn't been completed in accordance with the approved scheme, and so we are seeking the demolition of that building. He can, if he wants to, erect the building that he has permission for. That's a matter for him to decide. What the authorisation we're seeking is to the removal of that building. So it would be an enforcement notice, or perhaps two enforcement notices that would deal with those two matters.
Okay. So I think what we're faced with, if any member wants to speak, what we're faced with now is these 5 conditions that we're going to have to get legal guidance for, and also the in item 2, in the event of non-compliance with the notice, authorisation is sought to take such legal proceedings as may be required. So from the chair, I'm going to move that we grant these enforcement conditions, and I'm hoping I get a seconder.
I'll second that.
Okay. Does anybody want to say anything before I take a vote on it? No? Okay, well, we've read the conditions, what he's got to comply with, and as I said, in the event of the non-compliance with the notice, authorisation is sought to take those legal proceedings as may be required. Members, those in favour of that, please show. Okay. Any against? No. And no abstentions? Abstentions? Because you didn't vote in favour.
Or against.
Or against. Thank you. In favour. There you are. So that's unanimous. Well, Chris did put his hand up. I did notice it. Thank you. 9.2. So this is the Turner House Art Gallery, Plymouth Road, Penarth. I know the local member would like to speak, but would you like to lead us through it?
Thank you, Chair. This is in respect of an authorised works to a listed building. The works in question are the filling in of a light well that's on the ceiling of the ground floor and obviously floor of the first floor, and a balustrade that enclosed the light well, and it was in order to take advantage of the roof light that is obviously on the roof of the building. The balustrade and the light well were installed as a result of alterations undertaken in the 1940s by, I understand, them to be notable architects, and so those works are specifically mentioned in the listing description and are therefore important to the historic fabric of the building, and their removal is in breach of the legislation that relates to listed buildings, and it's been considered that if an application were to be submitted for listed building consent to remove these features, it would be recommended for refusal. There's a small error in the report where it says under the action pursued to date, it suggests that we have been in contact with both the owners and the occupiers. We haven't been in direct contact with the owners, who we understand to be the National Museum of Wales, but we are aware that they understand that our investigation was taking place, and they were being advised through the current occupiers. The reason that this authorisation was being sought was because the current occupiers did not think that they required consent to carry out the works, and they thought that we shouldn't be pursuing the unauthorised works to be undone. However, since this report had been prepared and published, the owners of the property, being, we understand, National Museum of Wales, have been in contact with us. They're very concerned about the authorisation being sought, and they wholeheartedly want to comply with whatever we require to reinstate the light well and balustrade. They have asked that we defer our decision, or the committee defer your decision until they have suggested they would be able to carry out the works by the end of June, but to give them a bit of leeway, seeing as they are so intent on satisfying us, that we suggest that this be deferred for another committee date to be set in the future, in order for us to monitor the situation and ensure that the works are undertaken to reinstate the light well and the balustrade.
Lovely. I know that Councillor Clive Williams is going to refute what you've said, but
accept what the officer says there.
yeah.
But in fact, this is one of the most important planning committee tonight, concerned with the most important public building in the Vale of Glamorgan. The Turner House Gallery is in Penarth unique. This is a listed two building created specifically as an art gallery by the founder James Pike Thompson, which along with other
Clive, can you just put your microphone on?
Oh, I apologise.
Yeah. Okay. Now people at home can see.
Along
who
with
you
its
are.
contents of multi-million-pound Turner paintings, was gifted to the people of Penarth. Now, this chairman, this is their gallery. Some background is necessary so that we know why we're taking action tonight. On the death of James Pike Thompson of Turner House, the paintings within it were handed over free of charge to the town of Penarth to be managed by the trustees of the Penarth Urban District, and they would own and maintain the building. In 1921, the council came to an arrangement with the National Museum of Cardiff to take over and run on behalf of the town in line with the wishes of the late founder. The National Museum was responsible for refreshing and rotating the art displays in that gallery. This has never happened. When the war broke out, it was requisitioned by the Air Ministry and the paintings were placed in the National Museum. After the war, the galleries were refurbished, restored and improved. But, and this is a very important but, the cost was not met by the National Museum. It was met by the people of Penarth from a precept imposed by the Penarth district. They funded all the necessary works. The council continued to levy that precept to Turner House for many, many years there. So this, I think, shows that the Turner House is still regarded as being the property of Penarth and the people of Penarth to who it was bequeathed. In 2003, the National Assembly leased the building to a photo gallery. In November 2015, Photo Gallery decided the Turner House venue was to be for a video artwork by the artist Ragnar Catterson. It involved blocking out the windows in the upper gallery, installing 9 video projectors and associated sound system, removing the central light well, which was one of the most prestigious parts of the building, and removing a balustrade which surrounded it and putting flooring over the aperture. No one seems to know whether the National Museum was consulted about this or consented the work to be carried out. There is no record of this council having been consulting about it, although this is a Grade 2 building listed in the conservation area. When the exhibition ended in the 21st of February 2015, no work was undertaken to restore the gallery to what it was before. The upper gallery is still blacked out. There's not a chink of daylight anywhere. The temporary beams and flooring is still in place. The light well has not been restored, and the balustrading which has taken out has not been put back. The exhibitions that are held there now are in artificial life. Now, I've taken legal advice in there. The entire area, open look, and the feeling of the building, both upstairs and downstairs, is totally different from that in 2015. And I think this is a huge breach of public trust. The National Museum Wales, which is not legally, which may or may not own the building legally, has not discharged its obligations to the people of Penarth. The people James Pike wanted to benefit from this bequest. The leasehold of, which is a publicly funded charity, has a lot of explaining to do by not seeking permission to carry out alterations which are done and hasn't tried to put these back since 2014. And really is, how is it that an organisation of the arts charity can deal with historical buildings and heritage and the conservation of Penarth in such a cavalier and insensitive and irresponsible way? I would have strongly endorsed what you've said there. But, you know, what frightens me is that the National Museum have now agreed, or not agreed, but given their blessing to a market once a month. Now, I think this is totally against what was originally proposed, Mr. Chairman. And therefore, it leads me to the question there, is that, you know, who is actually in control of this at the moment? When I spoke to somebody from the National Museum this afternoon, what they stated was that they've got so many artefacts and paintings that have been bequeathed over the years, they haven't got enough space to actually display them. So I posed a question now, why don't you reopen this now and put them there? And he said, oh, we'll have to think about it. But what I'd like to challenge there is that basically the ownership of that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for allowing me such a long time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, turn off your mic. I've got another speaker now, another local member, Councillor Gwyn Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. I endorse what Councillor Williams has said in terms of the value of that building to Penarth, but the simple fact is now that at the moment we're only talking about the central light well and the balustrade. It is a very important part of the building. It sort of completely dominates the character of the building inside. So it's absolutely right, but frankly, I think the National Museum of Wales appear to be now acting in good faith. They seem to be quite determined to do it, and I think we could postpone it, at least for a limited period, to give them a chance to do the work. If they don't do the work, it's only deferred, and we'll leave it to Justina's judgment as to when, if it necessarily comes back. But I think for the moment, we're only talking about the light well, and I think it would be appropriate to give them an opportunity to carry out the work. Okay. So I therefore move that we defer for another committee if necessary.
Okay, do you have a seconder? Second, there you are.
Could I ask, Mr. Chairman, through you?
Yeah. Put your mic on. Mic on.
On Councillor Gwyn's point, are the National Museum there taking hold of this? Because my understanding, the lease that the photo gallery have finishes in November, and certainly if I was challenged to spend a lot of £1,000s of public money, I'd be just waiting for that lease to come out. As long as the museum now are actually making that statement, then, you know, I'll go along with it, Mr. Chairman. But I think we should be really looking legally who actually owns the building. I think there's enough there to challenge that, that's all.
Okay.
But I'm not against what Councillor Gwyn said.
I'll just, do you want to come back on what's said? Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you, Jay. Just for information, Photo Gallery have actually contacted Penarth Town Council who want to. We don't know what they want to speak about anyway, but there's clearly an amount of attention being given to Turner House now, because it is a very much loved building in Penarth. And I think what will happen, let's do one thing at a time. This is an important part of the construction of the building. As long as that's put right, we can now start dealing with it and giving it the attention it deserves. I don't think it's going to be forgotten. So I understand Clive's concerns, but let's do one thing at a time, and I think this we can deal with properly this way.
Yeah. I know Jeff James had his hand up first, so Jeff.
Chairman, I'm unclear exactly what Councillor Roberts is moving, because the recommendations are quite clear that we should give authorisation to the head of legal services to take action to bring about the reinstatement. If we agree that now, that will add weight to our officers in negotiating and with the applicant to, or with the person who run the Turner Library, to say, Turner Gallery, let's actually get on with it, because it's quite clear it's an important feature in a listed building. It's been taken away without authorisation. I'm not happy to just leave it that we're going to leave them to have time to think about it. I think we've got to move the recommendation here to give strength to our officers to get it done.
Yeah. Okay, let's the officer come back on that first, Jeff.
Only to say that obviously normally when we take enforcement action, we in the first instance try and do it informally with the cooperation of the owners or whoever has undertaken the breach. in this case, the National Museum of Wales weren't aware until very recently that this was a problem. So we haven't done that first step, if you like. This, to a certain extent, this report has come to you almost too soon in their eyes, because we were liaising with the tenant and the leaseholder. They were the ones in breach. I think there was potentially a bit of miscommunication there between them and the National Museum of Wales. And so we would now say, let's hang fire on the sort of formal process for now. We're satisfied from very recent correspondence and communications that we've had with them today that they fully intend on sorting out this issue, and we've got no reason to mistrust them on that. And so it might be a bit heavy-handed to go ahead with the recommendation, the report at this stage, in light of the very recent communication we've had with them. Officers feel that really we should give them this chance informally to resolve it, which we're satisfied that they will do pretty quickly, as they've indicated to us today.
Okay. Councillor Parker.
All right. I'm going to quickly come back and say I understand the point being made, but I don't think it should be open-ended. I think perhaps we should think that this should come back to committee, say next month, and they've got that time to resolve it.
Yeah, Councillor Parker.
Yeah, I'm happy to agree to a deferment, but what I would say is we can't necessarily trust them to put back the T. Alwyn Lloyd and Gordon balustrade to the exact form. So what we also need is some strength, and Justine has already indicated that they've thought of it already, that we get detailed drawings, and the deferment is to allow them to produce the detailed architectural drawings for approval prior to construction works being undertaken.
Okay, before do you want to speak on that? I'll let the officer come back.
Sorry, Chair,
I've
just
seen John.
to confirm, we have had confirmation from Photo Gallery themselves and from the National Museum that they still have the balustrade. It's in storage, so that's what we would require, is the reinstatement of the original balustrade and not a copy or replacement of that.
Very well. Jonathan Bird.
Thank you, Chair. It does seem strange to me that we've got a report here that the recommendation is that we ask them for the reinstatement of the light well and the reinstatement of the balustrade. There's no time limit on that. We're not saying do it now. Surely we could pass this tonight, and just take a, well, you could put a time limit on it. You could say, because apparently this has been going on for over 12 months. And my concern is that it's going to rumble on another 12 months. And I just think it's here tonight in front of us. There's no, we're not saying to them do it next week. We're saying it's got to be done. And in fact, we could caveat that with, we could say, well, it's got to be done before the end of the lease. So I don't know. I just find it strange that we've got a report here that we're saying defer. Well, I just don't see a real reason to defer it.
Okay. I'll bring Councillor Gwyn Robertson, but I think that what the officer's saying is under normal circumstances you would allow someone to negotiate with the officers before you take formal action. The person who you're talking about over 12 months is the tenants who removed the balustrade, and the owner of the building, the National Museum of Wales, are saying, hold on a minute, we don't know anything about this. So give us the time, because you are talking about the National Museum of Wales, Welsh Government, really. Let's put it right. It's wrong. Let's put it right. And they're just saying there's no need for you to take formal action against us because we are going to put it right. So I think that's what the officers are saying. So I'll go over to Gwyn Roberts, and then I know Bronwyn Brooks wants to speak.
Thank you, Chair. I to some extent, we have to sort of give some freedom to the National Museum. They appear now to be acting in good faith. We also should have faith in our officers, to be honest. They've had informal discussions with them. They're now undertaking to do it. I'm happy to put a limit on it. I mean, I care about that building more than other people in this, some of the other people in this room. So I'm not going to let it go. I don't think we would let it go. But if the officers are dealing with it, it seems heavy-handed. And frankly, in terms of the credibility of this council, why put an enforcement notice on if somebody's voluntarily putting the work right? Now, a limit is reasonable, and I'm happy to put some sort of limit to saying it'll be done before the autumn or whatever, or perhaps the September meeting if necessary. But it just seems to me, why be so heavy-handed now? The officers will have to prepare the enforcement notice as well. Why give unnecessary work if the work's going to be done voluntarily?
Okay, Bronwyn.
Well, I was going to suggest if we did defer, is whether then it could come back to the next meeting with an update on that and actually see the progress within that month. It may not be finished by then, but then surely then, you know, if they've made a decent amount of progress by the next committee meeting, then, you know, they're actually living up to their promise. If they do nothing between now and the next meeting, then you know, we could move to enforcement then.
I think that maybe a bit. I'll ask the officers, but we're meeting in 3 weeks' time. What's your view? Yeah. Yeah.
Chair, National Museum of Wales have indicated that they can complete the works by the end of June. They've asked for a meeting as a matter of urgency with us and the Conservation Officer, so that we can discuss exactly what works need to be undertaken. As I've said, the balustrade is in storage. They won't need to submit details of the balustrade because the balustrade it still exists, it's still complete, just has to be reassembled. They had asked for a slightly longer period than the next committee, but as they have themselves indicated the end of June, and it seems to me reasonable to come back with an update at the first committee in July, and I can let you know. I'm doing that committee anyway, and I can let you know what progress we've made and what has resulted from the meeting with them.
To move progress, shall we say that we bring this back to the next meeting, defer it till the next...
The last comment, I totally agree with what you say there. What my concern is... That
Can you put your microphone on, because people...
I always forget.
Yeah.
My concern is that the National Museum has suddenly taken an interest. Where were they when they should have, as landlords?
Well, I think that's been explained to you, Clive.
Yeah,
They've only been told...
should have warned them that.
No, well,
that
that's what they're saying. They are saying that they were not told about this by the tenants.
That's right. So the point I'm saying is I haven't got confidence in a landlord who allows that to go on in a listed building. I mean, I would have sent one of my officers out there to find out what the person leasing the building from me was going to do to cover myself. But so really, is if we've got that assurance then from the National Museum, then I'm happy with that, Mr. Chairman.
Members happy we defer it until next month. Thank you. And a report being brought back by our officer. Okay, everybody happy? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Could we move on to the next enforcement action, which is 47 Peterswell Road, Barry? No. Sorry? No. Oh, I've missed one, have I? Yeah, page 39, sorry. Let's get back to page 39. Oh, yeah, we got land and buildings, the fruit farm, Hilly Marsh, near Wells St. Donats. This is agenda item number 9, and I'll ask our enforcement officer to talk to us about this breach.
Thank you, Chair. This is in respect of a established pick-your-own fruit farm, Hendrewennel. We understand it's operated since the 1970s and has in recent years handed over ownership from the parents to the 4 children of the owners. And they have established it more, in our view, as a leisure community type facility, as well as the pick your own, or alongside with the pick your own. We've had a significant number of complaints from local residents and the community council with regard to how the site operates, and there has been particular concern with regard to certain events that have taken place mainly last season. This season has only just seemed to have started recently this year. They have a very popular Halloween event, Easter events, and summertime events. What we're alleging is a change of use to a mixed use. So we're still recognising that the site is partly used for agriculture, but also partly used for this leisure tourism type use. And we suggest that that use isn't just as a result of the events, but it's also as a result of the day-to-day operation of the facility there, in terms of the play equipment that is permanently sited adjacent to the cafe. There is a bouncy castle usually at the site. There's children's sand pit, stepping stones. There's a castle and little houses that children can go in and out of. They provide a maze as well, and that is alongside the cafe that does have permission, but only as an ancillary cafe to the Pick Your Own, and obviously the Pick Your Own itself. This is an activity and a site that the council would like to promote. It's something that is beneficial to the rural community in terms of tourism, economy, job creation, but that at the moment is at the expense of the highway safety and of the amenity of the neighbours who live near the site. There is an informal arrangement with an overflow car park that it causes problems to two very nearby residents, and that's in respect of noise and disturbance and spotlights, and some of which has been late at night. But the main issue is in respect of the use of substandard single lane roads as the main access to the farm. We have suggested to the owners that they change the access arrangement so that they're off a better road, if you like, over the to the west of the site. And we had thought that an application was coming in, which is partly the reason why it's taken us a long time for this to come to committee, because we had been in negotiations. But it seems clear now that the owners are still, or if you like, they're going back on, they're saying that they don't think they need permission for what they're doing, and that hence the report now for seeking authorization for action. So it's unfortunate that we have to pursue this action requiring this use to cease, but it's only as a result of the highway safety issues and the neighbourhood amenity issues. I think even the nearby residents themselves have suggested that, you know, they accept that they're living next to this site and it's established Pick Your Own, but if the issues of the informal parking arrangements on the site and the access were resolved, it's something that they would be a lot happier with. So the authorisation is sought to require the use to cease, but the reason for serving the notice does set out that if an application were to be submitted proposing an alternative access and allowing us to put conditions on in relation to parking and other activity, that it is something that we could possibly recommend approval.
Okay, Councillor Andrew Parker.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually speaking mainly on behalf of Councillor Roddy Traherne, who's asked me to deal with the matter on his behalf. I actually live within half a mile of this, of Henbury Wennell, and have known the site for well over 20 years, and it's only in the last 2 years that its use has changed drastically from being a Pick Your Own to a multi-event use. And I actually got involved in the traffic jam, which caused major chaos, and in fact one of the immediate neighbours, who I know fairly well, could not get out of their drive for 2 hours because gridlock had happened, and on a narrow road nobody could move and all the verges and everything were damaged. Councillor Roddy Traherne has had, I know, with the benefit of Justina's department, discussions over the access, a new access road, which if it fed off the main country road which runs through to Hensel, that would immediately remove all the problems that have been created and will continue to be created. In fact, everybody at the moment is just worried and waiting for the next big disaster to happen, which could happen virtually any time when people descend on it. So I would support the officer's recommendation and recommend that you take the enforcement action.
Councillor Bird.
I'd just like to support Andrew in that. Again, I know it's a local business. I think it's a good business, but they need to comply, as we all do. And it's quite simple. I mean, we're not asking a lot of them. So I would suggest, I'll second Andrew's recommendation, and I would suggest we get on this as fast as we can to try and resolve it before other issues are caused.
Okay, is there any other member? Okay, for people at home, what we're being asked to do is, the recommendation is that the head of legal service be authorised to serve an enforcement notice under section 172 of the Town and Country Planning Act as amended to require them the cessation of the mixed use of the land for the purposes of agriculture and leisure use, the removal from the land of crop maize, children's play equipment and sandpits, marquees and any other equipment, furniture or paraphernalia that facilitate the unauthorised use of the land, the removal of the building described as the American barn. Subject to is where the officer's saying if you put in a planning application, we possibly would grant a planning under planning with some conditions. And in the event of the non-compliance with this notice of authorisation, it will be sought to take such legal proceedings as may be required. And that's what we'll be voting on. And I've had a mover and a seconder. Those in favour of that legal action, please show. Okay, that's pretty unanimous. Those against? And abstentions. We've got one abstention. Thank you for that. Okay then, so we're over to page 247 Peterswell Road, Barry. Would the officer like to tell us about this wall, which looks a bit grotesque to me, but I'll let you lead us through it.
Thank you again. This is the last enforcement item. It's in respect of a domestic boundary wall that's been constructed adjacent to the All Saints Church in Wales School. The wall is along the length of, or the longest length of the property, if you like. It's a kind of triangular property, and it is directly adjacent to the walkway and children's play area of the school. It is a particularly poorly designed wall. It's finished in the breeze block construction, hasn't been skimmed or treated in any way, but unfortunately we do have to recognise the permitted development rights that exist for the construction of a means of enclosure in a location like this, which would allow a 2-metre construction. Ideally we would like to see the wall completed in a more appropriate finish, but I think that all we can require, unfortunately, is simply the reduction in the height of the wall to the permitted height of 2 metres. There are parts of the wall that are in excess of that, and that excessive height doesn't help with its poor finish.
No, okay. Any other member? Yes, Councillor Parker.
Yeah, just briefly, I mean, I haven't seen the wall, but it looks as though it could be a 100mm wide wall. Having heard what you've commented on about the children, I think it'd be a very shrewd thing for one of the building inspectors to have a look at it. I can't see any expansion joints or any structural integrity that would allow me to say, well, it's going to stand up. So I don't know whether Justina can help on the... Is it a 200mm wall, or do you think, or 100mm?
I understand that there are pillars inside the wall on the property owner's side of the wall, so they would support the structure. Whether or not it's structurally sound, it isn't a matter that our building officers could look into, because my understanding is they can only pursue their action in respect of a building and not a wall or any engineering structure. It's only if that wall or engineering structure were part of a building could they pursue it. It's unfortunate that I first thought that it was adjacent to a footpath, which meant that we could perhaps look into the structural stability of it, but it's not. It's simply adjacent to the walkway to the rear playground of the school. So I'm not too sure that we can ask building control to look at it. Even if they were to look into it, I don't think they could pursue any action.
Thank you for that, Justina. Any other member? Otherwise, what we're being asked to do here is that the head of legal service be authorised to serve an enforcement notice under Section 172 of the Town and Country Planning Act as amended to require 1. The reduction of the height of the boundary enclosure to 2 metres from ground level, and 2. In the event of non-compliance with the notice, authorisation is also sought to take such legal proceedings as may be required. That's what the committee are being asked to do. It's been moved and seconded. Who moved it? Yeah, Councillor Bird and Councillor Jeff James has seconded it. So thanks for that. Those in favour of legal? Yes, that is unanimous. So thank you for that. We're now on to planning applications properly, and I understand the first one is rear of Windhover, Mount Road. Windhover? Windhover? Okay.
Whichever way you want to say it.
Okay, I'm corrected. It's Windhover, Mount Road, Dinas Powys, and it was subject to a site visit, and there's also some late reps. So I'm going to ask our Head of Planning, Victoria Robinson, to lead us through. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, just to draw your attention to the late representations, we've had comments from the Operational Manager for Waste, just confirming that the revised amended plans that show a turning head in the site are capable of taking a refuse truck, so waste can be collected from the dwellings. We've also had comments from one of the neighbours close by to the development raising objections similar to matters already raised in other representations and that have been addressed in the report, and also to further letters of support for the proposed development, all contained in the late representations. I also would like to draw your attention to some changes that I would like to propose if you are minded to approve the application in accordance with Officer's recommendation. Firstly, in respect of the traffic regulation order, for those of you that were on site today, I will go into the details of the scheme shortly, but there was some discussion about the entrance to the site, which is onto Station Road in Dinas Powys, and Condition 12 previously required a or as per the report, required a traffic regulation order to provide double yellow lines, in particular to the north of the site, to get rid of the H-bar, which is at the site frontage, and to have double yellow lines for 10 metres north of the access point. And there was concerns raised in representations received and on site today that that would result in the loss of at least 2 parking spaces on street, and that there was a potential harmful effect of that in terms of the local shops and stores in the village that obviously rely on passing trade and people parking up and being able to use them. So the highway officer has looked at this again today. I've had discussions with him and I've had an email from him. It's not in the formal late representations because it's only happened today. But highways have confirmed that actually the extension to the double yellow lines in that part is not necessary, having re-looked at the traffic situation and the visibility displays at the entrance, and that they are now happy with a condition that simply retains the H-bar and extends the H-bar by a metre at the entrance, just to prevent parking immediately at the entrance at the northern part, but that actually there's no need for further yellow lines beyond that, so actually those 2 parking spaces that we saw on site this morning can actually be retained. So I'm recommending a change to that effect to Condition 12. And I'm also recommending that we add a further couple of conditions just in terms of protecting neighbouring amenity. On the detailed designs of the elevation, which if I can bring up the plans shortly, you can see they're marked as I, which I doubt you'll be able to read from these plans, but they are the windows in the side elevation, particularly the west elevation. They've got metal louver covers over the windows, so I'm suggesting that we get more information about them and their method of installation, and obviously that they be installed prior to beneficial occupation of the house, just to make sure that it's protecting the privacy of the neighbours, and a further condition requiring privacy screens to the balconies, which are also visible as the vertical detailing at first floor on the western elevation of the property. In terms of the scheme then, to give you a summary, it's a proposal for 5 2-storey, 4-bedroom properties, as you can see from the plans on screen and in the report. Contemporary designed architecture, relatively low key in terms of the scale. They are stepped up through the site as it gently raises, and also stepped back from each other in terms of the terrace through the site, which again is clearly shown on the site layout plan. Relatively modern design, which officers feel is appropriate in this context. It's a secondary part of the conservation area set back off this old farm mews, which is an adopted highway. There are other examples of flat-roofed modern contemporary architecture in the vicinity that works well and has been, you know, recognised as good quality architecture. I think it's fair to say you either love it or you hate it, and we've had a mix of comments to both sides of the argument on this application, but officers are satisfied that it does comply with the requirements in terms of design and impact on conservation area and so on. There are 3 parking spaces provided per property, including spaces within the garage. Access, as we've alluded to, highways are satisfied with the access to the site, subject to the TRO requirements for the H-bar and double yellows to the south of the site, which to the most part are already in effect. This is just joining what's already there in front of the Star Inn pub. It also involves the reconfiguration of the car park serving the Star Inn public house, which will formalise the level of parking that's currently there, which is a little bit haphazard and spread out in the linear form throughout the site, as we saw today. So there's effectively no loss of parking in the pub and restaurant car park. It's just formalising the existing 36 spaces so that it works better within the site. Part of the site currently forms part of the garden to the property known as Windhover, and last committee approved the demolition of that house and replacement with 2 houses. So this has been considered alongside that, and in terms of the amenity space to serve those dwellings, the remaining large garden will be sufficient. There is slightly reduced amenity space per plot for this new development, which is not unusual for this sort of slightly more constrained site within a village core, and there are similar levels of amenity space to properties within the vicinity. And noting the fact that it's so close to the common, we don't think that that's a particular issue. So, take any questions.
Okay, that's the officers' view. They're happy with that application, but are the local members? So, who wants to speak first? Councillor Franks, there we are.
Chair. Thank you. Can I first thank the officers and hopefully the committee for the amendments to the traffic proposals. There was a huge concern locally, so thank you very much for that. Dinas has serious lack of parking, and even a loss of couple doesn't help. So thank you very much. And I would remind members who were able to make the planning site visit that the garden of the house that we visited, that is where the 2 houses are going, and that's not part of this current application. The 5 are beyond the tree line. So that's just for clarity. Now, I am concerned about the vision splay coming from the existing development, Old Farm Mews, because as you hit the main road, you have a quite substantial stone wall. I think, Chair, you were anticipating that the stone wall would perhaps be coming down. Well, that is not coming down. That is staying. And from what I can see, from a stationary position in Old Farm Mews, you do not have the relevant vision splay. And I heard the highway officer say, well, if 20 miles an hour, but it's not a 20 miles an hour zone, it's a 30 mile an hour zone. And unfortunately, sometimes we do experience speeds of 30 miles an hour, especially early in the morning when people are late for work heading to Cardiff. So I've got to flag up that concern that there is that point that we really need to consider. And then we go to the question of the station, the car park of the Star. Now, until the site visit, I had not appreciated how much of the car park was being lost. So that was quite a useful visit for even a local member who knows the area well. I was very surprised at the amount of space that's being lost. Quite often the car park is full of the Star. Now, where are these cars going to go? There's very little on-street parking that's available. So we're putting more houses in an area and we're reducing the parking. So that does not seem good policy to me, Chair. I'd be interested to hear other people's comments. Thank you.
The only problem I would say to that is that that car park's a private car park, and you have to ask, do they have permission to be on the car park? And the landowner who owns the car park wants to sell it for housing. So that's your difficulty. But we'll hear what other members have got to say. Was it Jonathan who had his hand up first? Okay, Jonathan.
Thank you. Just a little clarification, because I'm confused after listening to that. As I understand it, and if you're looking at the plan there, the part of the Windhover, whatever you want to call it, is garden, is definitely in this development, and you can see the stone wall marked on that plan of the car park now. So part of that garden is definitely in there, quite a large part of it actually. So could the officer just clarify that for me, please?
I'm not quite sure I understand the question, but to confirm, the site covers 3 different parcels that we looked at today on site. It includes part of the car park for the Star Inn public house. It includes a large part of the Windhover existing garden, which is L-shaped, which may not have been clear on site because it was quite overgrown when we went to see it. But the site, in fact, if I do, sorry, I'm going the wrong direction, but you can see here from the existing layout here where we are in terms of the existing L-shaped garden, the linear car park, which goes right up next to Old Farm Mews, then where we were on site to begin with this morning. So effectively what the development is going to do is cut out that narrow bit of the car park, which is where the majority of the parking and front gardens of these houses is going to be. But by using some of the garden of Windhover to provide some of the new parking area for the public house. So, you know, it's losing in one part where it's gaining in another, and the formalisation of the car park serving the pub and the restaurant is required by condition. And by formalising the car park, it just makes better use of land in terms of the car parking spaces. And as I've alluded to, there isn't a loss of parking in relation to the pub and the restaurant. It's just putting it in a different layout to make it work better in terms of the space available.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan. The next person I had was Val Hartree.
Put my light on, Chair.
Thank you.
I am so grateful for your action in sort of not decreasing the car parking so much. But can I make it clear that the parking gap outside Old Court, that will be double yellow lines, will it? Where, you know, there's a break, so people often park outside Old Court. That is to be removed.
I'm not sure what you mean by Old Court. Sorry.
Old Court is the Old Court next to the Star.
With the stone,
listed building.
the stone wall.
Where the yellow lines are already.
Yeah, but there's a broken bit in where
Yeah,
cars
that's
park
it.
along.
Yeah. There was a car there.
Yeah.
So that's going.
The intention is that. Sorry.
Okay.
You turn your light off, Val, so the officer can reply.
Yeah, the condition 12 in respect of the yellow lines to the south of the junction stays the same, and I was convinced that it is necessary for visibility displays and safety along that stretch of the road that the double yellows are there. For the most part they are there, but this will just join up where they're not. So if I refer you to condition 12, the bit that says, and the extension of existing double yellow lines along Station Road to the south of Old Farm Mews shall be extended up to the junction, that stays as part of the condition.
There you are.
Sales, really. I'm very relieved that that has resulted from the site visit, so I'm pleased about that, thank you. I'm not concerned with the design of the houses. I'm no expert on those. What I am concerned is the proposal to enter and exit it from Old Farm Mews onto Station Road. This road is already overused as we all know who live there, by traffic coming from Dinas Powys, from Barry to get to Penny Turnpike at speed. So at morning and evening peak times, it is unbearable. We also have a school bus that in school term, you know, parks in the village square as well, so that's difficult. Now, Highways originally had an objection to the proposal because of the hammerhead, or wasn't a real hammerhead, it was half a hammerhead. But now they've realised they can extend it, it's okay. Now, the existing properties were quite able to cope with the taking down of their rubbish, black bags, green bags to the highways, not a huge distance. So I don't see that that was a problem. And I'm told by the lady in, I think, the top house, Nan, that she had a small van collecting her rubbish because she's disabled. And as Chris said this morning, the refuse lorry only comes once a week. I've got to check my notes now. But even if we retain some of the existing parking, there is still not sufficient parking within the village. And the landlord of the Star has kindly said in the past that he's happy for people visiting the village to park in the car park, but in the daytime only. So as a result of this parking in the village, the parking up the hill onto the common has increased a lot, I notice, in the last few months, which isn't helpful to elderly and disabled people. And then they've got to negotiate the constant traffic on Station Road. So I don't think the proposal is necessarily going to increase footfall to the local shops, as the existing customers are likely to go anywhere else should the parking be, decreased. I wonder, were the existing shops consulted about this? Probably not.
Why would they?
Were they? Oh, they didn't. I didn't get that impression when I spoke to them, because when I mentioned the fact that at the time places were going to be deleted, they weren't at all happy. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I'm not happy with Old Farm Mews, and incidentally, so many people have said, oh, we assume the access and entrance to the development will be via Windhover itself, which is quite a wide site. They're very surprised when I tell them the news. So I wish to propose three things. First of all, that there's only a left-hand turn out of Old Farm Mews into Station Road, thus obviating the need to go into two-way traffic. Should cars then wish to go towards Barry, they can return into the opposite side of the Toyne to go out via the Station Road junction with Cardiff Road, or they could go down to Cardiff Road and access it that way. The second point, that there should be a new traffic regulation order at the narrow point of the Toyne, you know, where it is a triangle, to stop cars, or certainly dissuade cars, from doing a U-turn in order to exit Station Road. I think that's most important. The local estate agent tells me that he's so often watches people doing three-point turns around there. You know, a U-turn is one thing if there's no traffic on the left-hand side and on the right, but a three-point turn is ridiculous. And the other one, 20 miles an hour, was mentioned just now. We should have another traffic regulation order to make Station Road from its junction with Cardiff Road into a 20-mile-an-hour zone. I think the first, and going back to the houses themselves, I think the house at the top of the Toyne, which I think is number 1, of Old Farm Mews, does impinge on the privacy and enjoyment of the limited garden of number 12. Now, we well know you're not entitled to a view or whatever, but I think it's being a bit enabling. I think that covers it, really. Now, some of my my parking concerns have been...
just to get it clear in my own mind, you're accepting the officer's recommendation with 3... No? Well, what are you asking for then?
I told you what I've asked, 3 proposals.
Yes, which are to change the conditions, or add 3 conditions.
You'd have to have a left-hand turn only.
So that's one condition.
One thing.
Yeah.
That there should be a new traffic order, I don't know where it would be exactly, at the narrow point or the sharp point of the Toyne Triangle to stop cars doing a U-turn or a 3-point turn.
Yeah.
this area definitely needs a 20-mile-an-hour limit.
Right. Well, I haven't. Can I just say to you, I don't think it's in the remit of this planning committee to put traffic orders. We're not traffic officers, but I'll take what the.
But can I just say, Chair, this is in. What did you say? In the event that this gets approval, I won't say any more. This is what I would like to happen. These three things.
Right. Okay. So we'll hear
Doesn't
from
mean
the
to
officer.
say I accept it.
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, in terms of consultations that have been undertaken, they have been extensive, as you'd expect for a scheme of this size in this sort of location, all the adjoining properties and a large number of the properties over the road from the entrance onto Station Road, a number of which are the commercial properties. So just to confirm, that has been undertaken. In terms of the matters you've raised in respect of traffic regulation orders, obviously we have got a condition requiring a traffic regulation order. That is limited to the extent of works that the Highway Authority have advised are necessary to make this development acceptable. I did discuss with the Highways Officer today the proposals that you've just alluded to, because we briefly discussed them again on site. Their view was that none of those would be necessary to make this development acceptable, and it couldn't be reasonably required in terms of a condition on this planning consent. If members are concerned about the speed in terms of the centre of the village, in terms of 20-mile-an-hour zone, or U-turns or 3-point turns happening at that point, then you need to take that up with the head of visible services in terms of the council's capital forward work programme. But certainly it wouldn't be reasonable for us to require it as part of this development scheme. And in terms of a left hand only, they simply just don't think that's necessary in terms of the visibility displays and the access point here. They're satisfied with the provisions that have been made in the application, so I wouldn't be recommending to members that we do impose those types of conditions.
Okay.
Thank you, Fred. Can I just say I would like my 3 recommendations recorded, please, in the report.
In the minutes, you mean?
In the minutes, yes.
Yeah. Okay. I'll come to you after Nick. Jonathan Drysdale had his hand up.
It was only ever my mother who called me Jonathan, and that was when I was in trouble, but hopefully not. I have 2 questions and a suggestion. The first question is about parking numbers in the Star Inn, because my count on the plans is that the number of spaces before the development and after the development is actually the same, and just to get a confirmation of that. The second question is about amenity space. You mentioned both in the report and the presentation that it's a lower than usual level of amenity space, but can we just know what is the amenity space compared to the usual standard? And then just finally the suggestion, which is one I've made to officers before, but I was reminded of it when Victoria was talking about the plan, and apparently from what she was saying, moving a cursor around to point at different points of it, which is utterly invisible to me from this distance. And the suggestion was, can we have a big fat red cursor on our presentations, please? And I understand there was a problem with our IT section blocking such loadings, but I'm sure it's not beyond the wit of IT to... well, apparently there is a bigger one there. But yeah, we certainly need something we can see, because quite often people are pointing out features and you just can't see what it's pointing at. Anyway,
okay.
Thank you.
Good point. Would you like to come back on those points, Victoria?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, now I have discovered that I've got a laser pointer. Would you like me to go back to the points that I was pointing out? Okay, fine, good. I know, now I know it's here. Okay. In terms of the parking, you're quite correct. That's what I was referring to earlier. The reconfiguration of the car park means that there is no loss of parking in terms of the Star Inn, public house or the restaurant. In terms of amenity space, I have got the calculations here for you. Our amenity standards SPG requires 1 square metre of garden space for 1 square metre of internal floor space. And those standards are basically best practice, but they are not rigid, set in stone requirements that we have to rigidly apply. You've got to look at each application on its own merits, and we do very often approve approve dwellings and extensions to dwellings that actually fall short of those requirements, and you have to consider in each case whether or not that's appropriate. In terms of the actual figures here, if I can just briefly go through them with you. These are approximates because it's relatively difficult to measure areas on existing plans, but the internal floor space, for example, of plot 1 is 292 square metres and the amenity space is 218 square metres. So there it's, you know, about 2/3, I would say. The smallest plot for amenity space is plot 3, which is internal floor space of 248 square metres and only 78 square metres of garden area. So that is quite a way short in terms of the amenity space. A lot of that is to do with the configuration of the turning head area, which is obviously cut into the available space for that plot. I know I'm pointing at the screen with my pen. Justina's going to use the red. That one. There we go. So you can see there the plot 3's got the turning head cutting into the to the garden at the front. There are incidental planting areas which aren't included within these figures, but that gives you an idea really of the shortage of amenity space we're talking about.
Okay, I'm going to go to Councillor Nick Hodges.
Thank you, Chairman.
Sorry.
I've used the car park at the back of this pub because I've used this pub many a time in the past, so I like to think I know it quite well. Absolutely, yes. I had my designated driver with me. The end of the car park, which is now going to be taken up with these properties, actually did take a lot of cars, and I'm surprised to find that this reconfigured site has the same number. I'm surprised at that. But my question specifically is looking at the car park as reconfigured on this diagram on page 54. Is there sufficient space that if these spaces are all taken to actually get in and get out, especially at the ones marked, I don't know, they numbered 13 to 20 or something like that, the skinny bit of the car park, if you know what I mean. That's my first question. Yeah, it's very small numbers, but you know what I'm on about. The second question is I understood that you've sort of poo-pooed the fact that we can come up perhaps with regulation traffic orders off the site that influence or improve the matter, but we've done that tonight with the amendment of condition 12 with first there was no H-bar, then we are going to have a bigger H-bar, and double yellow lines were going to be provided, now they're not going to be provided, or this, that and the other. So that's been significant changes. So whilst I appreciate that we're not asking the developer to actually chip in for any other changes, I am concerned about the safety. That is the most narrowest of roads. There is a kink in that road as well, where other properties from the other side move into it. And I think it's time that we start taking road safety seriously in a space that is so condensed with all these shops, and where it condenses where you've got the War Memorial there as well. It is a dangerous spot, and I think we need to take that quite seriously. So I see exactly where Val's coming from with a 20 mile an hour. I think it's also very sensible and reasonable to have a one-way out exiting the site. And it should not be outside the wit of this council to get that sorted. And I have to say that I have no concern about the style of houses. We've got some interesting styles already gone in around that area. But the access and the road safety concerns me. And I'm struggling to agree with this site as it stands simply because of that. But I'd like an answer on the getting in and out of the car park if it's full from that dog leg, that L piece there.
Victoria?
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, obviously, we don't have a highway officer here, but they haven't raised any objection to the layout of the proposed car park. There is 6 metres spacing between the parking spaces in that narrow bit, which is enough for cars to manoeuvre in and out of those spaces. Obviously, if the entire car park is full, it's going to require some manoeuvring back to the larger head to turn around and go back out. But it's not adopted highway, it's a private car park. It's no different to the existing arrangement in terms of, well, it's probably better than the existing arrangement in terms of the narrow head of the car park as it currently stands. So we certainly don't think that's any cause for refusal of this application.
Okay. Councillor Andrew Parker?
Yeah, no, I mean, Vicky's actually covered it. I mean, I can tell you that's laid out to the normal standards you would expect with a 6 metre space between the 4.8 and 4.8. It's the standard one you see throughout all the supermarkets. The little point that might help, when we do get a scheme this complicated, I was lucky because I was on the site visit and actually had an A3. I think if we can just have an A3 site plan, that would help, because I actually have managed to work out that the little red line on that and that are slightly different in the sense that the red line would be there, not there, and that can only come out that. But a couple of A3s of that, Victoria, would be, I'm sure, helpful for everybody.
Okay. Councillor Jonathan Bird.
Andrew has just said, I was going to comment on the only difficult spot in that car park will be position number 19, and they will be able to reverse out to position 8 and then drive out. So, car park does work.
Okay. Yeah. Would you like to just come back on that, Victoria?
Andrew, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Only just to say, Chair, I would love to provide you all with full sets of plans every month, but I appreciate that. Unfortunately, we are as a council trying to cut back on paper, and I don't want to produce A3 site plans for everybody unless it's absolutely necessary. However, I will be bringing the planning committee files with me so that we've got A1 versions usually, and we can refer to them. If there's any details that aren't clear on the screenshots or in the report, obviously we'll have them to hand so that we can clarify them and members can obviously gather around and have a look at them. So I'm hoping that will satisfy you rather than me reproducing A3 plans for every site that we look at every week.
I only said when we have something which actually requires an understanding that I can see that quite clearly, but I can tell you I could not look at the scheme. Now, maybe only 1 in 20 or 30 of the applications could merit that, and threatency for whatever. It would certainly help.
Yeah. Okay, we've given it a good airing. Have we got a proposal, a mover and a seconder?
I'll move the recommendation of the officer.
Seconded by Councillor Bird. Okay then. Those in favour of the application, please show. Yeah. Okay, those against? 4. Okay. Abstentions? 1. Okay. It's clearly carried. Thanks for that. Let's move on to the next application, which I understand was a site visit, which I attended today with many others. Green Meadow in St Nicholas. And another local member would like to say something about it. But it was well attended. There's some late reps, I believe, as well. So we'll hear from those late reps and the officer, subject to members' approval. We'll take a vote on this after. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this application did come to you last month and was deferred for a site visit. There are late reps from neighbouring property opposite the site, raising concerns which are strictly outside the remit of planning committees making a decision on this application. It's raising concerns about over provision of car parking and potential concerns in terms of the occupier's business and commercial activities that might be taking place, but that's not what the application is for, and certainly officers aren't raising any concerns with the level of parking being provided in the site, and also raising some concerns with the wall along the boundary of the property, which has been left to deteriorate in terms of the fence panelling above it and so on. Again, you know, a replacement wall to 2 metres, which is roughly what it looked like on site, is not wouldn't require planning permission. It'd be covered by permitted development rights, and there are no proposals for a replacement wall as part of this application. Neither do officers think it reasonable to insist upon changes or alterations to that wall. But nevertheless, we think it's highly likely that given the amount of works that are being proposed to the dwelling itself, which looks like it's in need of some love and attention and repair, as we saw on site today, I think it's almost inevitable that the applicant is going to do something to that wall because he's doing so much to the house itself. But those are there for members to consider in the late representations. So as the report sets out, this is an application for extensions to an existing house, a two-storey extension to the side, quite a large replacement of the existing garage on site, with a replacement of quite a large single-storey garage and carport with a pitched roof, and then a flat roof single-storey extension on the back of the house. You can see in the report the plans there. We have received amended plans since committee last week, which have set the garage in off the boundary by 800 mil. And then that's had an effect of also reducing the pitch of the garage, so the height's reduced. We did allude on site today that actually the garage element of the proposal, which I think is where the main concerns are most likely permitted development. It's only the fact that it's part of the larger scheme that's come in as part of the planning application. So I'll hand over to members.
Okay, I'll ask the local member, Councillor Bird.
Yes, thank you, and thank you all for coming to the site visit. Had I understood the implications of moving the wall in 800, that it had reduced the pitch, I probably would have said go ahead with the site, cancel the site visit. But anyway, we've been on the site visit, we've had a look. I'm still not particularly happy with it. I think it would have been a lot more friendly as a flat roof, but there's nothing we can do about it, so I'm going to say no more. I'm just going to abstain, and I don't expect anybody else to do any different.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan. Anybody else want to say anything? Otherwise, I'm going to ask for a mover and a seconder.
I move the officer's recommendation.
There we are. Margaret Wilkinson moves the officer's recommendation. Seconded by Clive Williams. Those in favour of the officer's recommendation, please show. That's unanimous, but Councillor Bird is going to abstain. So Councillor Bird's abstained. Can I thank you for turning up this evening? I understand from the planning officers that next month's we've got no site visits and it will be a light agenda. Okay, thank you.